Great. Well, thank you all. And certainly it's I'm glad to have the opportunity to share the work that we're doing, excuse me, at the coalition. But, we're very much aware that similar work is going on across the South Shore to address the needs of homeless. And in our particular situation, we predominantly work with homeless families. So, our life at the coalition changed October 19th when we got a call about taking on the Baymont Inn, as the state had to reach out to start up the hotel system again. And it has been, to say it's been a roller coaster would be, Mike knows he's been, and Karen's been at the hotel. There's a lot going on. What we thought originally was going to be 17 families quickly grew. We've gone up to as many as 70 families. Right now, I believe as of last night, we're at 67 families. We have 115 children. 70 of them are under 5. So it's a very active building. There's a lot going on, and we really hit the ground running on it. And but with the help of a lot of other agencies, we had already had relationships with some Haitian agencies, because in our Pilgrim's Hope shelter, about 50% of our population there are of Haitian descent. So we had already developed some relationships with the Brockton area community, and that helped us get things running at Baymont. But there's so many facets to it. And I should start by saying, first of all, that 20 to 25%, depending on the day, of the families within the hotel shelter are from southeastern Massachusetts. So those families certainly have a separate set of circumstances that we're addressing, but every single one of them obviously is dealing with homelessness. And as in every case, we're dealing with the case management to really figure out what families need, and then set them on the path to identifying housing. We couldn't have done it without the support of the community, and probably, as many of you know, in the first few days we had we didn't get great community support. I think that probably a lot of the television media hype around it caused a lot of chatter, and then that drew some attention that we didn't desire by any means. And we had demonstrations that were of I'm not really sure who the group was. We never did get a name for the group that appeared, but it was very, very jarring, and it was upsetting to the families that were in shelter. It was upsetting to the staff, and it definitely caught the attention of everyone on South Shore and beyond. It really, but it worked. What it did, I think, is bring out the best in people. And from that point on, we received nothing but strong support. Within a day, there was a big sign out in front of the hotel saying that the community supported the coalition and the families that were being helped through the hotel. So that we were able to overcome that. We've been, as you mentioned, we have started to see people identify housing and move on. But there are so many, with the immigrant population, there are so many other issues and concerns that we have to address, that takes up a great deal of time. And there are things like home base in place, but you still have to be able to work, and you have to be able to afford part of your rent. And as many of you know, these families are having a very difficult time getting working papers. We've had great support from the Justice Center and the folks in their office. They've been here several times. And Mike and Congressman Keating's office has been very supportive in helping us on the path to try and speed up the working paper process. But all of these things are part and parcel of what's going to allow the immigrant population to create a new life here. And they want it. I think what everyone has to understand is that they truly, truly want nothing more than to provide their family with a new life and some hope. And obviously housing is part of that. Now we're a couple of months into this with them, and now we're starting to, they're starting to get a little bit antsy. They want to see things happen. So it's always nice when we do have a family in shelter that does find housing, because it gets everybody else a little more inspired that it is possible. And that's really what it's all about. It's ensuring that they can remain hopeful and see that there's possibility. So we're working with Father Bills. We have once a week we have a couple of housing specialists that come in and work with clients. We have 3 case managers on site. This is just at the Baymont. And we have 4 families here 3 days a week, again, assisting with the case management. So, and I've spent the larger part of my time at the hotel. I'm hoping that as we beef up our staffing, that I'll be able to start to get out and not be tied to the hotel as much. DHCD has been nothing short of tremendously supportive in the whole process. I think we're starting School on Wheels at this site in another 10 days. So I'm a big believer in School on Wheels. We know that that's going to make a big difference for the children, and just providing them not only the educational support, but also mentors that will help address their issues. So we are hoping to start ESL within the next couple of weeks, and we'll have to do a few classes each week, but we have so many people that I'm not sure how we're going to manage that, but we will do. Medical and transportation have been our biggest challenges. We do use the TPP, but I think the first month we spent $4,000 alone in Lyft rides. And it just, that's been a challenge. And not only has it been a challenge just financially, but it's a challenge in, especially again, with the immigrant population, understanding how to use the Lyft, and that you have to be there, and and not all of them have phones like we do. A lot of them have the WhatsApp, and you can't, that becomes a little bit of an issue with Lyfts. So that's it, but we're working through that, and we're trying to transition as many families as possible down here for their health care. What happens is when families come into the state, they get channeled through BMC, Boston Medical Center. And so immediately those doctors give them return appointments. And then they want to go back to Boston, and we try to say, well, no, you can go to a doctor down here, it's okay. But New Country, you don't understand everything. It's a hard sell sometimes. So we're working on that. Harbor Health and BID have been strong supporters of us. I may have mentioned, we've had 8 babies since, we have a few more, I think this week and next week coming. So that's been exciting. And again, I keep going back to the hopeful thing, you know, it really is. It's good for everyone when you see families remaining strong. Most of these families are intact families. So there's that's a different scope of services as well. You know, it's the dynamic there is a little different. So medical has been nonstop. We have Mass General Hospital School of Nursing does their clinical section with us. And we get both nurses and nurse practitioners. So they've always been helping us at the Pilgrim's Hope shelter. So we work toward transitioning them to do some work over here as well to triage. But we're looking now to bringing on board a nurse. But that's because most of the triage work is done in our office, and that takes a great deal of effort and time. And so that's been a very big concern and issue, because most of the families haven't seen medical providers. Dental is a very big issue with them. The food piece of all of this is also another area that requires a lot of energy here. In a hotel, you have a small hotel refrigerator and a microwave. And if you're like me, your office has a big hot tub in it. But I actually have, well, Mike knows, he's seen it. We, in the beginning, were providing, the hotel provides continental breakfast. And in the beginning, up until 3 weeks ago, we were providing lunch and dinner. We've scaled that back to just dinner now. But again, that's the EA program is just that, it's a program. So while we have to be sure that families have access to food, we need to also bear in mind that we want them to become self-sufficient. And our location isn't the greatest for access to stores that take SNAP. So right now, that's a piece that is a little challenging, but we do have twice a week, we have Haitian restaurants that come in and do dinner. And then we have 2 local restaurants that cater dinners as well. So, and then we're putting out, you know, Nutri-Green bars and those types of things as well during the day. So they do have access to food. But it's not easy when you're in a hotel room and you just have a microwave and you have 4 kids. And there are several families with several large families, I should say. So school has worked out great. We have probably a half dozen kids going to their home community schools, and the remainder are in the local schools. We're still daycare vouchers and that's a challenge, because as I said, we have 50 kids under 70, and that's just us. So that's like telling Head Start a new school. And, you know, obviously that's not possible. So addressing childcare, we have several parents that would like to get out and work, but they can't get into a daycare program. And so they can't go work. And that limits their opportunities as well. So that but they've really assimilated well into the community. The children have. I think it's, unfortunate that fortunately, the weather's been fairly good this winter, and we have a large courtyard where they can go out and run around. So unlike a shelter that would have a playroom, or the hotel doesn't have that, but kind of working on that too. So, but we're expecting within the next 6 weeks to have our education program really ramped up to where it normally would be. So
did you say 70 kids?
70 under, we have 115 children,
Wow.
70 under 5.
70 under 5. Okay.
Yeah.
I knew there were a lot of kids. I didn't realize there were that many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are that, but they're good. As I said, 2-parent families, and their parenting skills are pretty good. We don't have a lot of issues that way. I think, for me, my concerns come now where it's the first couple of months where everybody was getting acclimated and trying to figure out expectations and what could and couldn't be. And so now you have a lot of people that are just in the building, like trying to figure out what can I do to keep busy. So that's a concern. So just want to be sure that they're only using all that time to look for housing. And that's
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody has any questions about it. I mean, I could talk about any one of those areas nonstop because there's so much to it. But I think that the thing that I always try whenever I speak about this is that if we can increase the understanding of the community that these, in fact, are very good people who are just looking to build a future for their families, and they want to work. They're appreciative of everything. I have to tell you, they're just beyond grateful and polite. They're great to work with. The translating piece, we are utilizing at different times during the week. We have different folks come in on a volunteer basis. Our 4 families staff person does have Spanish. We had in October, November and December, we had a Haitian speaking staff member, and that was a very big help. We use TransPerfect through DHCD, and Google Translate has really been a godsend. But TransPerfect is the DHCD program that we use. But in most cases, I say a lot to the staff, these families came this far. Many of them, we've had people that walked for a month and a half to get across the border. So they have a command of multiple languages, many of them. And so they're resilient, and they do a good job of managing to adapt to everything here. Hardest, like anything, the hardest when you don't have the ability to have your own choices. That when you're in a program, you have to go by the rules of the program, and you don't choose what you're going to have for dinner, and you don't choose what clothing is going to be available to you. We've had tremendous donations of clothing to the point where we've had to say we have enough. I have 2 trailers at the Pilgrim's Hope site filled with donated clothing. So that's been, but you don't get to choose. And as a homeless individual, homeless family, you lose everything. And so, but the one thing we can't take away from people is their right to choose. And in fact, when you're in a program, we do take that. So, and that's even with our food pantry program, which I just had the numbers the other, we were feeding a lot of people over the holidays, and with the Children's Holiday Fund, we were doing record numbers of families. We did close to 1,000 families for gifts this holiday. And in the food pantry, when we had to shift to boxed, a drive-through format, that took away choice. People didn't get to go in and shop, and we haven't been able to revert back to normal function because the volume is so great that we're just not able to do that. Eventually we will again, when we hopefully have a new site for it, and then we'll be able to have more space, but yeah.
Yeah, I
So-
think it's important for folks to realize that, step back and realize that while you're doing this incredible effort down at the hotel, all your other programs are still going on too.
Yeah.
Shelter, food pantry, etc. We did have a question in the chat about funding for the program for the migrants who were, all of the folks who were being put up at the end, and that's funded through the state. Is that correct? So
Yeah, so our regular GHCD contract was amended to be able to cover those expenses. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, we had to put in a proposed budget, and just like any other contract. But yeah, and again, balancing act when the food piece is the expensive one. That's really been that's been a challenge. And then you have to, if you have it brought in, then you have to have staff to serve it.
right.
So that means you have to extend your staffing later into the day. So, and they do love getting the Haitian food. I mean, we have somebody that comes down from Mattapan on Fridays, and the families couldn't be happier to have that when it comes. It's great. Yeah. So
Sue, are you is your contract paying for the hotel directly, or is some other group paying the hotel bill?
So it goes through DHCD.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have our contract, and then yeah, the billing definitely goes through DHCD.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this might be a good segue, unless anyone has any other questions. Sue, can you talk about, you said there were a couple families who had been placed in residential, in apartments or whatever. Can you talk about maybe one or two and how that happened? Because I think that'll be a good transition to what John's going to talk about.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, when the families meet with their caseworkers and we have the Father Bill's staff come in, they're always exploring possibilities and trying to get them. Well, the first thing we do is make sure they're on CHAMP, that their name is, their family is registered for all possible public housing. But the most notable one was Felicia King, who was the article in the Globe, and hers was a great story, because that was a story of someone that really, with the assistance of caseworkers, was able to put together her housing package. But there was someone that had incredible drive. She was a grandmother who lost her daughter at a young age through a congenital heart condition, and ended up with, I'm going to say 8 and 10-year-old granddaughter and grandson, and very active kids. She really chose to take, I don't want to say take the high road, but she didn't let all the adversity that had happened in her life get her down. She almost rose to the occasion as opposed to let it. And she was really inspirational. I mean, there were times when she'd come into my office and be a little frustrated, but we were able to support her, and the workers, she made sure she was making her appointments every week. And she kept looking and looking, and she knew there was one area she didn't want to go back to because she wasn't necessarily happy with her past in that area. And she just really was a strong woman, or is a strong woman, who knew her priorities, and she didn't care. She was going to work. She lost it. It was a no fault eviction on her part. It's how she lost her housing. And she's just an incredibly inspirational woman, and I think she made an impact with a lot of people in the hotel as well. And she was able to get home base, so the 20,000 over 2 years. And she still does have a voucher possibility out there. So, but she's got, matter of fact, I've got to call her today and check in with her. And she just, she was an example of someone who really knew what she wanted and went after it. And she recognized that we had the resources available. And when she didn't understand, she didn't hesitate to ask. So she was a bit different. And she came in here just before, right when she found the housing, and it was, she had a signed lease, and she sat in here and talked as eloquently as anyone about all she had been through in life, and all she wanted to do is bring up her grandchildren and make sure they went to school. And it just, like, I was totally amazed by it. And when she finished speaking, that's how the article came to be, because I was just like, would you mind sharing your story? Because it's just too, and you're talking about somebody that she made her living by going around and being a clown at birthday parties. And she'd go, that's really how, and she worked at Edaville as a character at Edaville. So she's definitely a great woman, and her kids her grandchildren really have a great role model. So we've had a few sad, a few people that have gotten that close to getting housing, and it's fallen through because the identified housing, everything was in place, and then you can't get a lead certificate. And that's, the lead certificate is a huge piece, and most affordable units are older homes or older buildings that if they can't come up with the lead certificate, they're not going to be able to get, they can't get home base without that certificate. So but we have a family right now. They have a signed lease, and I think they should be going very shortly. And same thing, a mom who, that was a no fault eviction. You know, most of the families, and I'm sure John would agree, most of the families from our area, poor credit or no credit is a huge barrier to identifying housing. And so this family, she's been working on her credit, but she's should be moving out. She just got the signed lease 2 days ago. So that, and that will be good, because she's somebody that came to this country a long time ago, worked, I think she worked at one of the big chain stores, but worked for 18 years. And then through, no fault of her own, ended up without without housing. So, but she's been driven as well. And I think that you have to, people that are successful in identifying housing they have to be involved and engaged in the search. They have to have that desire and fire in their belly to really want to beat the obstacles and get their own home. I find, and I think that's why the immigrant population is frustrated, because they can't get the work papers. And they can't get, so that's the stopgap on them.
Yeah.
It really is. And I don't know if that's helpful or.
No, I mean, it's great when you see a story like that in the paper and to highlight it, but then it's almost like you hear the whole story and it's like you kind of have to be a unicorn, you know what I mean? The person has to be highly motivated. The circumstances have to be almost perfect, including the connecting with the unit or the housing placement. So I don't know, it's almost like discouraging to hear that so many things have to fall in place correctly.
Yeah, well, I think, one of the things the coalition, at least I constantly talk about the fact that everything we think, say, and do should be driven by a concern for social justice, but more than anything, done with compassion.
Yeah.
So we try to make sure that commitment to deal with our clients with a depth of compassion, but still maintain a framework and an expectation that they have goals and they have there are set expectations of them as part of the program. So, but I think we have a great relationship with the clients here at the hotel, and I think that's because we've tried very hard to be welcoming and supportive of them,
A meeting with
but let them know
12:30 today.
that they have to follow the guidelines of the EA program.
So thank you, Sue. And I know folks probably have questions. There might be some questions in the chat. Please do put them in the chat. Hopefully we'll have time to address all these questions, but I do want to transition to John Yazwinski from Father Bill's Mainspring House, and worked with John for many years on the housing issue. And another media star, John, I heard you on WGBH the other morning. They're doing a really great series called Priced Out, really eye-opening series about all the obstacles and challenges folks are facing with housing. And this latest story was about older single women and the challenges that they're facing. And you talked a lot about how you're seeing more older single women in shelter and needing housing. So we're really glad to have you here, and very eager to hear about the work that you're doing.
Thanks, Michael, and thank you everybody for having me. And just kudos to Suzanne and her organization stepping up in these tough times. I know that I'll really, my comments will be directly looking at the homeless, unaccompanied individuals. So not so much about families, but really speaking about the Plymouth area and how we're doing to combat that. But before I get there, I just wanted to highlight just the tremendous work that Plymouth Coalition for the Homeless has stepped up in this time of need. What we've been seeing is across the state, probably since late spring, is really an influx of migrants, undocumented families and individuals showing up in Massachusetts, as you know, in a variety of ways. We had the migrants that came to Martha's Vineyard in September. Father Bill's and HAC actually ran the base together when we brought the people over to the Cape Cod base. And that was our first so it's like, okay, we've got a problem here. And I think on the family side, Father Bill's in Mainspring shelters around 133 families a night throughout the Southern Mass region. And 20% right now are people that have recently come from Haiti, Venezuela, and other communities. So I think we're starting to see where I think I read somewhere that the state said, probably over 9,000 families or individuals with families and individuals have come into the Massachusetts since the spring and really it's been the family shelter system, the EA system, that has become the response to this problem. And so, you know, when for many of us that have been around a long time, we were in the hotels 2009, 2010, 11, and 12. We had over 1,000, 1,500 families in hotels. We were able to get out of those hotels probably about 6-7 years ago, and sad to say now we're the whole state, we're all getting back into it again. So with that, in a sense, for Father Bills and Mainspring, if people aren't aware, we will shelter over about 280 individuals in Quincy, Brockton, and Plymouth on any given night. We, as I said, shelter about 133 families throughout the region. And we currently operate over 700 units of permanent supportive housing for formerly homeless families and individuals. And as Michael said, the recent article is over the past decade, the number of elders staying at our shelters has doubled. And recently we've seen a huge increase in women elders coming in at this point. And that's a national trend. I think what we've seen is the rising rents, people with fixed incomes falling through the cracks, not being able to keep up with the rents. We've lost a lot of rest homes and nursing homes, assisted living care, a lot of smaller places like that, especially in the South Shore. And so it is a big concern about going forward for that particular group of people. What we're seeing kind of in the Plymouth area, in the programs that we have, we've been partnering with the Plymouth Task Force to End Homelessness. I know Connie Mellahors has been the leader of that program for so long in the Plymouth community. And I remember going down when Father Bill McCarthy was alive. I remember going down in about 2001 and 2 down to Plymouth and starting to work with the task force to address the homeless individual things. And so right now, what we offer for emergency shelter, of course, is anybody can come to Father Bill's in Quincy or Mainspring in Brockton. But we do offer a overnights of hospitality in Plymouth. The program is a seasonal shelter for individuals. The program begins in late November. We do it like Thanksgiving weekend, and it runs through April. And we rotate between 3 churches in Plymouth: Christ Episcopal, the First Baptist, and St. Mary's. For logistics, for intakes, if you know of people that might need shelter, really the guests must be at that host site, usually between 5 and 5:45. We are following the CDC health and safety protocols for social distancing, about 3 feet right now. And we'll put Pat Ronan from my team, will put in the chat the contact information to see the site. If you have somebody, the phone number that you can call to get somebody into shelter, or if even you want to learn more about the overnights program and how to support it, please learn more about it. In December, our average right now was about 11 guests per night at seasonal shelter. In January, it's ticked up to about 17 guests per night. The good thing is, in the past, some of the churches had restrictions where they wouldn't let females come in. And we've been able to get all those restrictions removed. So we have 8 women staying with us right now in the churches. I think what we've seen on average the last couple of years is about 35 to 40 unduplicated people using the Plymouth overnight shelter. Father Bill's, and I know we'll do a housing piece of this later this winter, but I'll just say, of our 700, Father Bill's has about 80 permanent supportive housing units in Plymouth and 20 in Wareham. So one of the things we're excited about is the housing units we've done in the Plymouth area has really been targeted towards the chronic homeless individual. So people that really have long-time homelessness, if you're from the Plymouth area, are recognizable being outside, really are ricocheting in and out of emergency rooms, psych hospitals, detoxes. So people that have severe mental health and substance use issues, we've targeted that group And thankfully, we've been able to, the last several years, get that a majority of those people out of homelessness and into supportive housing. So the 17 people that we're serving right now, majority of them are all new. And that's been part of our problem, not just in Plymouth, but system-wide for Father Bills, if it's in Quincy or Brockton, is if we move 20 people out of a shelter a week, let's say, there's 23 people that are new to us that are at the door. So, as much housing, and housing really is what we're all trying to strive for everybody. We just are right now in these times with the inflation and the rising rents and stuff. What we're seeing is there isn't enough housing out there for people, and we're seeing people kind of coming to us in a variety of ways, in variety of reasons. In Plymouth, we've also seen an increase of people from Wareham. Years ago, there was a churches did a overnights program similar to what's been in Plymouth for a long time. That program is really defunct right now. So we are seeing, and on average in the past years, we'd see maybe 3 or 4 people from Wareham coming to the Plymouth shelter, but that's picked up this year also. We have seen also, or we have not seen an increase of people, thankfully, in Plymouth sleeping outside. We would estimate between 50 and 20 individuals sleeping outside in the Plymouth area, especially in the summer and springtime in the park and things like that. But we definitely have seen an increase of older people coming in. We had a veteran that was living outside for over 10 years in Plymouth. We work with our outreach team. We're excited to say that we finally got some housing for him, and he's moved into his own apartment now. So again, it's when you have somebody that's been sleeping outside for 10 years, it's a huge transition just to say it's okay, you can sleep inside now and have your own place. Our type of housing is supportive housing. It's harm reduction. It's called Housing First. So people that still struggle with substance use and mental health, you don't get kicked out if you're going to continue to struggle with those things. Even if you struggle with paying rent, it takes a lot for us to say, okay, maybe we need to move on with this type of housing. So we hope to be a very low threshold housing and shelter program here. So overall, like I said, we've seen increases across the region. The pandemic, COVID, I would, running congregate shelters, wouldn't recommend it to anybody during a pandemic. We had to depopulate ourselves. We used hotels, we used tents. We're still in hotels now throughout the region, trying to socially distance people because of the pandemic. So we're excited to be back in the churches, as during COVID, the churches did close the program. But we were able to shelter everybody during the pandemic in Plymouth in a local hotel. So now we're back into the churches at this point. This program has also always been privately funded for several years from Father Bills and Plymouth Task Force. We're excited to say that when the state recently procured the individual shelter system, the state recognized the long-time commitment that these two agencies had, the churches had, the community had, and they're now helping subsidize the winter overnights program. I think a lot of times we have discussions also about, does Plymouth need or should they have a year-round shelter? I think that our ultimate goal is not to create a permanent year-round shelter, is to create more housing. And our next step would be to know that yes, people in May, June, July, and August need a safe place to sleep. And right now we don't have that. So one of the things that we've been looking at is in Quincy and Brockton, we're converting our individual shelters to be more of a housing resource center that focuses on prevention, diverting people, rapidly rehousing them, but still has emergency housing beds. And ideally, that's what we would hope to be bringing to Plymouth also, if the political will was there, is to not just open an emergency shelter, but open up a response that, yes, can provide year-round shelter, but really is focused on some of these best practices. And it's not just an emergency shelter. With the ARPA money coming in, we were really hoping to get maybe this type of a model committed to Plymouth. It's been hard to continue to get everybody, the political will, I guess, across the board in the area to commit to a strategy to end homelessness in Plymouth. But absolutely can't say enough about the community and the support of how we responded in a very compassionate way to address. And I think the idea of how many units we've been able to bring to Plymouth or create in Plymouth has led to not major increases in homeless individuals in the town at this point. So I appreciate being a part of it. Welcome any questions, of course. People want to learn more about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. We have a lot of questions in the chat, but I have one that I want to bring up. I know New Bedford, of course, they're a different, it's a federal mandate that they do a point in time counts every year. Can you talk a little bit about that? And is that happening only in the bigger cities, or is it happening in Plymouth as well?
Yeah, no, it's so, it happens every year. And Congress basically says that it's not kind of per community. It's called if you're in a region where it's a continuum of care, called this continuum of care funding by HUD. And so Plymouth falls into the South Shore continuum of care count. So that Plymouth's count is coordinated with the Quincy, Brockton. So Plymouth County, Norfolk County region is kind of combined. And we give our numbers to the feds in the state and all of that. So yes, we can break it down individually and share that count with people and stuff. And for people that don't know, what everybody does in the country is on the fourth Wednesday of January, everybody goes out and you count your sheltered and unsheltered families and individuals in the country. It's a point in time. And then that data gets uploaded. So it just kind of speaks to the need in the country. So when, people like Michael and our reps and senators are looking at the need, at least there's been one particular count. Now, it's not perfect. I've always debated with HUD in New England, we shouldn't be counting in the wintertime because there's a lot of people that are doubled up, a lot of people that are hidden, that we're not seeing the true need. Of course, that it'd be good to get better unduplicated. How many people did we serve a year? And those are the things that we really focus on too.
So thank you, John. A few questions in the chat. Someone's asking about Wareham, whether there are any shelter options in Wareham.
No, so we've developed about 20 units of housing in Wareham. The Wareham Turning Point is an organization I know for years that asked us a couple of years ago. They're part of our continuum of care group of all shelter and housing providers that focus on homelessness. If people want to learn more about that, they could reach out to us too, and we can connect you. It's a group of providers, organizations throughout the region that meet to look at the regional needs. But Wareham doesn't have overnights anymore. They did have churches that were doing it, that were organized by Turning Point and church groups that seem to have subsided now. But it's a recent development. So people in Wareham are either kind of heading, they might be heading to Hyannis, they might be heading to New Bedford, they're outside, or they might be heading over to Plymouth is what we're seeing. Father Bills does have and will be trying to do more community street outreach to get a feel of what the need is in Wareham.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Melissa, you had a comment about empty buildings in Plymouth, and I don't know, do you want to ask your question or?
It might just be really naive, but I think it's frustrating to have all these empty buildings that are just sitting locked up, and then to have so many folks living on the streets. At one point I worked in the industrial park, and the property, abutted some woods, and there was a little tent city living in there, but it was young people. And I have a concern for folks with disabilities that aren't found eligible as adults through DDS and what happens to them. So all these folks that fall through the cracks, I don't, and again, it's probably naive, but is there a way to convert them, at least temporarily, into appropriate, nice housing while the greater issue is addressed?
Yeah, no, great question. And Melissa, if the time is now, actually, because the amount of ARPA money that is out there that, President Biden's bill, it specifically says in it, like, this should be targeted to help people that are experiencing homelessness, and it should be for housing, or it could be for shelter. And I think one of the things that I think we've all got to think about is the political will that's needed in our communities to cite these projects and be committed to it. So that's a huge barrier right now, is how to orchestrate it all and get all the stakeholders from the community on board. But we need to do it now. We've never
John,
unprecedented funding right now that's available both at the state and the national level.
Yeah. So ARPA specifically, there was funding that went directly to the communities. There was also funding that went to the county, but there's also funding that went to the state. So there are different buckets, if you will. Some of the money that went to the community, I think, has sort of been allocated at this point. So that's certainly something we can look into. I do know, just as an example, the city of New Bedford, which got a lot more money than Plymouth, only because it's a big, much bigger community. They're actually in the process of identifying abandoned properties that could be converted to housing, like some of their bigger warehouses, old fishing canning facilities that aren't being used. So it's a major undertaking, because you're talking about huge properties and big amounts of money, quite frankly. But that's just an example of what some of the ARPA programs that are happening. But it's a great question and a great prospect. Sean, you popped up to the top of my page, so I assume you have your hand up, although I can't see it. So go ahead.
Yeah, I did, just because it's funny that Melissa asked that question. I was on a call earlier today with someone from the Department of Education who's in charge of homelessness. It's the McKinney-Vento Act in the state. And what the state is doing right now actually is identifying areas across the state to deal with, the hotels that have been housing families, and to find sites that would be suitable. It doesn't answer her question in terms of like the local places right in Plymouth as you drive through town and you see these places. But I'm saying that the state is looking at this. Part of the challenge is that, from what I'm understanding, a lot of these locations that they're looking at do need work. They need to be made suitable for living. And so there's a little time delay on how that's happening, but it's in the works right now. And I just wanted to share that. That's all.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. Wanda, you had a question in the chat about the sort of the income threshold. Do you want to ask your question, or?
Yeah, hi, Wanda from We Can. So we serve women who are in domestic transition services. We serve the community with workshops for empowerment. And we've been getting a lot of phone calls, and increase, especially around the holidays, folks living in their car. We have a lot of single mothers that are going through divorce, and they're staying in hotels. So we've just seen a general increase in these folks that are displaced, and we notice that a lot of them are above the income limit to receive housing, and so and they're just above by several thousand. So I know that there was an increase at one point in Massachusetts for that limit, but I didn't know if that would include the Cape region as well. I'm not aware of what that would entail, and if that's in the pipeline.
I guess I can start, Wanda, and say, are you speaking to housing, like they're not eligible for housing subsidies, or actually shelter, family shelter, or both maybe?
Yeah, that's not my familiar territory. So when we refer them out, we're just looking at that income, and so far we haven't seen that they would qualify for either. Yeah,
Okay.
so just looking to see if that would increase.
Yeah, so I would say one of the struggles is right now is you're right, is on the family shelter side. there is an income eligibility, and we see it a lot where somebody's working, they can't pay their local rent prices, and now we're going to ask them to quit their job and to get shelter. It just doesn't make sense, right? But so that is a reality that we're all dealing with. And on the housing side, I have seen income levels go up more on the federal side. So I'd be, but again, I'd be surprised. So I guess all I could say is if you, Pat will put my email or his email, and if you want to reach out, we could probably have somebody on our team talk to you more about those income levels and the eligibilities going forward, let you know.
That'd be excellent. Thank you.
And Wanda, I know Weekend is on the Cape. I hope you're in touch with the Housing Assistance Corporation down on the Cape as well, because they're
Yeah.
a great resource. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? We covered a lot. I have like 2 back pages of notes here about everything that we talked about. I want to thank Sue and John so much for being here, and Patrick, for sharing those resources and their information with us. John, you alluded to the supportive housing units, and I think that's really going to be a great conversation when we come back together in February at our meeting. We've reached out also to NeighborWorks because they are certainly very active in our region in providing housing solutions, which is what the name used to be. So we're looking forward to that panel in February. So thank you very much to John and Sue. We have a little
Mike,
bit of
can I
time.
just-
Yep,
Mike,
John, go ahead. Sorry.
Just sorry, if I could say one quick thing, time is the essence. I will speak more next month about our housing recently and what we can do to combat it. But Father Bill's, I'll talk about, is we bought a hotel and not to be for shelter, but we converted it to permanent housing in Brockton. We put kitchenettes, and I'll speak to that. But if anybody is aware of a hotel, as hotels seem to be for families, but if anybody's aware of a hotel that you think the owner might be willing to sell, let us know, because a conversion to hotels are perfect conversions to permanent housing for our families and individuals going forward. So just wanted to put that out there real quick. Thanks, Mike.
John, was that the one right across from the VA?
Yeah, it was the roadway in.
Yeah.
It was the first shelter to housing conversion in the state at this point. I think I've heard there's more in the works, which is great to hear. So
Awesome. Well, I look forward to hearing more about that in February. Any quick announcements, programs coming up? We covered a lot today, but there's always a lot going on. And with all of our folks who are new or relatively new, certainly want to give you the chance to talk about your agencies and what's going on. Teresa, you want to talk about your conference coming up?
Oh, thanks for the plug, Mike. Yeah, so To the Moon and Back has our Beyond NAS conference coming up on March 10th. We haven't had it since COVID. The first time we had it, we were completely oversold. We had 320 people in attendance. It is being held at Hotel 1620, and we have some really great speakers. I'll put the information in the chat for people.
Great. Excellent. Thank you so much. Any other announcements? There's always stuff happening in the chat, which I try to follow. Pat Ronan put his email in there. Thank you. And yeah, so again, thank you to John and Suzanne. Such an important topic, certainly top of mind, not only because of the time of year it is, but really the time of history that it is in terms of what's going on with housing. So I guess one last question for you. With your folks that you're dealing with in Baymont, is there anything that individually or as agencies we could do to support you and the folks at the hotel?
I think that if there's an agency that does provide services that can assist families as they're trying to build up and get stronger and be able to identify housing. I mean, it can be, obviously there's a breadth of knowledge among the agencies. but these families are just like any other family. They all need various support. We haven't seen a lot of substance abuse running through this particular demographic at this time. That doesn't mean it's not going to surface, but certainly the education piece and the I think Sue West is on. We're hoping to start up our parenting class again so that we can get that moving. But yeah, I would say anybody that has contact with Haitian translators, we need them. We need them basically every day of the week, and that's we get them here and there. You know, we have the contacts and we get them in on for specific things, but we could use an interpreter all day long, and that's a piece that is helpful. But yeah, we're just you know, I mean, we've gotten this successfully with the hotel program because we've had relationships with all the different agencies and been able to reach out. So I guess maybe all I say is thank you, really, because it's been whether it's BID and Harbor Health and Social Community Action has certainly been supportive. We've gotten a lot of assists along the way, and we expected that going forward as well.
Yeah, I you know, you alluded to this, but sometimes when it's not on the front page of the Globe or, you know, on ATD at 8 o'clock in the morning, people don't always pay attention and kind of fades from the front of mind. So certainly we are, you know, as a coalition, and I'm sure as individual groups, want to support you and support those folks as much as we can. So let's keep talking about it. And if there are specific needs that come up, make sure you let us know this so we can be as supportive as we can.
Thank you. You know, I will say one thing is that I think if anything, this brought to a head, most people, when they think of homelessness, they think of individuals. They don't think of families as being homeless. And that has what I've found is that this has really brought it into conversation and the depth of the problems. I mean, Sean could probably give us a number of the families in Plymouth that the unidentified homeless families that we know are couch surfing, and there's so many of those across our region and across the country. But those numbers are really, they're just shocking when you get to really recognize them. And so family homelessness does exist, and it has to be part of our conversation. So I'm grateful, if anything, that we've been able to have a more conversation about that.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. Kim did put in the chat that we are always looking for member agencies to highlight, whether it's during a meeting or on social media. So please feel free to reach out to Kim Chinat23@gmail.com with that if you'd like to be highlighted. And there are no other announcements. I guess I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Melissa Kenny, you move to adjourn? Oh, Amy. Okay, Amy and Melissa seconds. Excellent. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. Thank you all so much. Thank you again to John and to Suzanne. And we look forward to seeing everyone next month for part 2 of our discussion about housing.
Great.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.